Hi, and welcome to the 2021 BRIC Summit panel on inclusive comedy. We'd like to thank you for joining us as we look to break, reinvent, impact, and change. In this panel, we've brought together some amazing speakers to share how comedy can be more inclusive, how diversity can be celebrated in this space, and more. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists.
Hello, my name is Roxana Ortega. Friends call me Roxy. I am an actor, a voiceover artist, a Groundlings Sunday Company alum, and I'm currently the voice of Frida Casagrande on Nickelodeon's The Casagrandes cartoon, one of the first Mexican-American multi-generational family cartoons. And I am also a podcaster, the co-host of The Risking Space, a podcast about art and discomfort. And that my co-host is also a woman of color.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Leonard Robinson. You can catch me doing stand-up pre-COVID at the Comedy Store, where I've been a regular for a number of years. I'm also a main company member of the Groundlings, still doing shows online on Zoom, sketch and improv there. And you can also catch me on HBO's Insecure, or getting ready to shoot season 5.
I'm Maisie Culver. I'm a film and TV writer. I came up in sitcoms. I was on Last Man Standing for a long time on ABC. And I'm also currently on Sci-Fi's Day of the Dead, which is an adaptation of the George Romero classic, which should be airing soon, and developing a couple projects in the meantime.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'll be the moderator today. My name is Matt Buholtz. I'm the co-chair of content for BRIC, and I'm excited to have this talk. So today, let's start off by talking about inclusive comedy as a creator. So when you're working in in comedy to make it more inclusive, what sort of things do you need to keep in mind?
I think, it seems kind of simple, but I think when you're talking about being inclusive, you need to make sure that you are being inclusive. That you're covering, a wide spectrum of people of different colors and backgrounds. I used to joke that, Hollywood's way around diversity and solving that problem is just by doing more period pieces. It's like, there's this big push in Hollywood about diversity. And then they're like, up next on Vikings. Like, okay, well, all right, I'm not going to be in this. I forget, I was watching The Tudors once on Showtime and I got really into it. Then I was like, wait a minute, I got to wait like 300 years before I show up in any kind of favorable fashion. Why am I watching this show? And I think what you've also seen like this year, something that's interesting is if you have like something like a breakaway hit like Bridgerton, where it's not really, it's based in a time, on an altered time period. Or even like The Great on Hulu, another one where it's like an altered timeline. Well, actually, that one's a little bit, The Great is a little bit more based off of Catherine the Great. So, it says right there, mostly true story, but they decided to just cast kind of how they wanted to cast. And it's a fascinatingly diverse show with, some historical references that really kind of don't mean anything to anybody, and then you got something like Bridgerton where it's set in kind of an altered timeline in the UK. It kind of mirrors what society was like at that time, but reimagines it if the population and status and everything was diverse across the board. So, that's a big difference than, to contrast the classic hit Friends, where it's like, we're just going to cover some people living in New York City and everyone you see will always be white. I mean, that also creates like an alternate timeline and an alternate universe. So right. It's just like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Or you find the tropes, the classic, well, then you have the one Black neighbor, or, you kind of see people doing that. Or in terms of diversity, well, as long as we have one Black person, we're okay, we're covered. Or sometimes it just feels a little too calculated and not natural. Just experiencing it as a viewer, what feels authentic and what feels right and what feels a little more heavy-handed. but as somebody who cast like a live show, Minority Retorts was a live storytelling show I did at the Groundlings. I really wanted to bring underrepresented voices to the main stage. And I found myself wanting to cast people that I didn't see in storytelling and all around town, and that I hadn't seen on stages in general in comedy. I mean, I think stand-up is a little more well represented, but Leonard can speak to that. But I also, would catch myself and make sure that I didn't just go, okay, I have one, gay white man. Now I need one Asian female. Now, I can't now have, somebody who is, let's say Korean American, because I already have my Persian here. I would catch myself going, no, I could have 4 Asians. Like, don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to just not be so heavy handed and cast the best storytellers you can find or the best people you can find, but look for diversity because it just adds so much, helps people feel seen. It adds dimension to the characters. It adds visual dimension, right? We're in a visual medium where you're like, oh, that person's so interesting. I never see somebody like that, So I think you have to be onto yourself as well, because we can kind of get sucked into the same type of thinking, like, okay, I have my bases covered. So those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I fully agree with everybody. Just to build on it from the writing perspective, I think it's important to create authentic characters and to be sort of mindful from the beginning that you're not writing tropes and that you're writing people. And you want it to feel, I think whatever you're working on, you want it to feel true so people can care about it. So you don't want to make a false world. You want to make something that people can buy into. I've been thinking a lot about WandaVision recently and how they've sort of been re-examining comedy and sort of the history of sitcoms. And in particular, it's been a very interesting take on the sitcom wife.
Mm.
And it's really interesting to see how for so long the sitcom wife has just been the straight man, and they've never been the one who's allowed to be funny or the one really who's nuanced. And it's nice seeing that has at least started to change.
Mm-hmm. And I totally agree with you, Maisie, and I'm loving that show. And I think also in the writing, to write characters that are humans and not representing their race or culture, like, as Latinos are not represented on TV. Like, there's the invisibility is just glaring, or it's got to be, oh well, they're it's all about how they speak Spanish, or they're it's got to be so steeped in some sort of specific culture. There's not a lot of nuance that's going on, and there's not a lot of stories being told. Well, like Bridgerton, it's so refreshing that you have Black characters. It's not about their Blackness, right? It's about their human needs and desires outside of that. So I think that for me is the future.
And even speaking on Bridgerton, they did it so they did it so slick. There's one line in Bridgerton where they explain the whole universe, and they don't make a big deal of it. And it stands out to me because I was, also as a writer, I love how savvy when people can be really savvy with their exposition, right? And there was a real passionate moment, and they explained that the king fell in love with the queen, who was one of us, and because of that, we're all free, and we have this new life. They didn't make the episode or the whole show about that. They just threw that out there, that little bit of exposition that all of a sudden explains why England looks the way it is at the time, and why Bridgerton is the way it is at the time. And I say all that to say that people of any color can be anything, and are. And I think part of the biggest problem we see these, a lot of these shows when they, television or even film, sometimes when they're trying to be diverse, it becomes all clunky because they have to explain why this person is in the room. It's like, why would this guy be friends with just some black dude? I don't know. They met at the gym. Got it. And now we got to see this whole big thing about these two people who obviously are, from such disparate backgrounds that they never really would be friends in real life. As opposed to if you just, like Maisie was saying, write real people, right? People with feelings and goals and aspirations. And then you start casting, as you start casting, great. By virtue of this person of color popping on the screen, they're going to represent that person, that culture, and that background as they see fit. But it's when that crazy clunky exposition where we got to explain, why he's knows all these things or why he's friends with this guy, and they try and write in these little stereotypes to try and make it seem like, see, we're being inclusive, and like, as a person of color, I'm like, we don't want that. I want the option to bring it, but I don't want to have to be, to have to play it because you wrote it like that.
Yeah, sometimes I think that like people can be nervous about writing outside of their experience. And sometimes they are writing, like you say, out of obligation or trying to feel like they're ticking a box. And I don't think that's helpful. I think it's better if you just write people and you believe in them. And then if you want to give them a certain type of background, do that and honor it. But, don't be awkward about it. Because like you were saying, if you see friends from different backgrounds, in what situation am I going to be explaining to you, oh, yes, this is my friend, he's gay, but let me explain to you why I have a gay friend.
Mm-hmm.
It's just people make connections.
So, like, do you have to cater your comedy knowing that people may understand, or do you take it in a way where they'll follow along with you as you create?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, I see it a lot in stand-up where I think you got two kinds of people that, stand-ups, I think, that are those that are going to try and lead the audience, take them where they want to go, and those that are just pandering and know it's going to be an easy win, and those are, for the most part, we're called like hacks. It's like, great, you're funny, and they're laughing, but they're laughing for all the wrong reasons. They're laughing, and your writing is just, is barely scratching the surface on whatever the topic could be. These are easy wins, and I think the best shows and the best, stand-ups and the best, comedy period or whatever are people that take you someplace you weren't expecting, and or start with something familiar and then show you a side that you didn't expect, and dig deeper into that and get more complex and get more, depth with it. But I think you're seeing a lot less of it, now on television or whatever. But just repeating these stereotypes of these same, awkward situations. It's like, whatever the sitcom, TV dad meets his daughter's boyfriend, and then it's like I show up, and it's like, oh, hey. It's like, oh, we still doing this? Are we still doing, oh man, what happens if my daughter dated a black guy episodes? Like, there was a whole, Sidney Poitier was nominated for, I don't know if he was nominated for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, but, that movie was just passed when they, started making movies in color. Like that same, conundrum, they've been trying to run over and over again. It's not up to date. I mean, in the stand-up world, you also see that, some people playing off of old, decades old stereotypes and not doing anything new with it. So, I'm not trying to be the comedy police here, but I'm always just like, if it ain't new, why are you doing it? If you don't have a new take on it, why are you doing it? And so maybe some of that on the television side falls back on, some of these producers and studio execs who have a certain preference on things. But I think we're definitely in the last couple of years have seen a trend where people are pushing the narrative and and I want to say be more innovative.
Or innovative,
and pushing the boundary on these things, and moving the needle. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's okay for audiences to be lost sometimes. I think it's okay for if the comedy's coming from an authentic place, your audience will find you, and some of them will be like, huh? It's okay that they don't get everything, or that they're like, what was that? That we don't have to, pander, and we don't have to kind of spoon feed everything um, to audiences. And I remember once I was working on a pilot, and I was working with some other writers and on it, and I had Spanish in it because the characters, it was based on my family, and the characters spoke Spanish. And I I did my draft of it, sent it to the other writers. When it came back, they had altered it. They were two white men I was working with. Um, and they had altered the script to say, don't worry, there won't be too much Spanish. As a note, they had written that. And it was a terrible feeling, because it presumed that the audience was, one, going to be lost if there was some Spanish, two, that the audience was a white, non-Spanish speaking audience. And it was just peppered in there, you know what I mean? So that to me was like a red flag in terms of a collaboration, because when your voice is, when you're being asked to really change your voice or apologize for your voice so that it's understood, I think that's a problem. So again, like, speaking authentically, whatever serves the comedy, whatever serves the story, the character, and then the audience will find you, and those who are confused will now be in a position to educate themselves, to find out something new, and be curious.
Yeah, first, I'm so sorry that happened to you. That's so rude. I think that people don't give audiences enough credit for what they are willing to watch. I mean, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in like a 400-person town, and
Wow.
yeah, tiny place outside of St. Louis, which is a big place. But I sort of learned the world through watching different types of TV shows. And I think it's important to see different people, different countries, different languages. And it helped honestly build my view of the world and my ability, honestly, to feel empathy for lots of different types of people. And I think that now people are watching, I think about how popular K-dramas are now on Netflix. And I think a couple of years ago, executives would never have imagined that. It's like, no, if something is good and it's compelling and it's interesting and they're cool characters, people will want to watch.
Yeah.
Well, that's the sad thing, though. It's like they're so things shift and they get so popular. I mean, I give Netflix a lot of credit because they're definitely, I think a little bit ahead of the curve on pushing out stuff and putting out content that people should be seeing, and not just trying to, even if, without any, I don't know. I think they're always trying to stay ahead of the trends, that are currently there, and they keep creating new ones, right? But a lot of places, I'm this is my feeling as a viewer, they don't get it until they see the numbers. Then, a lot of people are not willing to say, no, we stand for this. These are our values, and this is where we want to be in 5 years. So we're just going to start pumping out this content and hope that, and grow the audience, not even hope that they're there, but grow the audience and say, this is where we're at. And, it's unfortunate that there has to be some numbers behind it. And what I mean by numbers, viewers, when the viewership is so out of control, people are like, oh, well, we got to get this. Or if some little sleeper hit film makes so much money that they're like, well, what do we, when Black Panther came out and it made the money they did, people were shocked, except Black people who wanted to see a superhero movie, and there happens to be a lot of them, the K-drama thing, I think also is kind of like an obvious thing where, it's like K-pop is super hot and it's been super hot. And those fans, they intersect on all kinds of platforms. So it's so strange that I guess I mean, it's probably a terrible joke, but I used to say, racism would probably never be solved until just like a lot of people die. There's like a lot, like so many people got to die first, but not like executed. They just have to just kind of vanish, almost like an HBO like Leftovers kind of situation where like people are just gone. We don't know why, but then we realize who's gone and we're okay with it, and then we move on. That's what I used to think, and then the last 4 years, we just kind of like refueled the whole racism, pool. So there's just
More
way more
generations
people. Yeah, it's
sprouted
just
up.
way more people than I thought we need to just vanish.
They're
So
having
instead of
babies.
yeah, so maybe we need to lose like maybe 6% of the population or something like that, and just poof, just let them be gone, and then we'd be okay. 'Cause, the other thing about great stories and all that stuff, it's like I'll watch it. Everybody will watch it. It's just when you watch something and you feel like, am I purposely being excluded from this universe, from this narrative, from this world? Like, why? Why is that the case? Again, to use the Friends example, I never watched Friends until
Last week.
I was gonna say like last week or 3 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
I never watched Friends. I was like, because it just seemed like this ain't for you. We got like 6 people in New York City, all white friends, and that's all they hang out with. So I'm like, yeah, then I guess I won't watch that. We there was also like Living Single, I think, at the time, and some other Black shows. So I probably watched that too. But I watch everything. Yeah, and for sometimes it feels like there's a purposeful exclusion from things, and then there's something like Monty Python, Search for the Holy Grail, where it's like, it's yeah, I guess there could have been some other minorities in it at the time, but it just feels like that they probably weren't thinking about that at that time, whereas like in the 90s you definitely should have been thinking about that.
So I gotta ask, what changed last week that made you watch Friends?
Oh, you know what? I'm putting myself through my own self-made film school. So I'm just studying
Sitcom
all
school.
sitcoms, all multicam and single cam comedies. I'm just studying a lot of them. So I had to go back to that one.
Love it. One of the things that you brought up that I'm really interested in is how risk averse Hollywood can be.
Yes.
And how, I mean, if you want to see something, the audience has to almost ask for it. People are so unwilling to do anything that is unproven.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about like Living Single and all of those sitcoms, I know there were a ton of sitcoms about Black people in the 90s, and then the executives after that were like, oh, there's too many sitcoms, which split an audience. And then after that, there was another glut of sitcoms about white people.
Yeah.
And I always get worried about people being so reactionary, and just because they're so interested in profit model that they, I don't know, they just they're so reflexive rather than thoughtful about it.
Well, also the truth of the matter is that a lot of the people that we think are like innovators and progressives are, fall into that category, what they call like the coastal elites. You know what I mean? Like the people that really watch TV, that really consume a lot of this TV, aren't thinking about a lot of these issues and aren't necessarily, all that up to date on a lot of this thinking, which is why it's easier to make that same old thing over and over again, just in a new way, But don't you also think though that some of the best TV lately, or the stuff that's really kind of moved the needle or shaking things up, were shows that actually took big risks in some kind of way?
God. I feel like right now we are so in the age of peak TV, and there is so much out there that the only way to stand out is to take a big swing. Like the shows that we're used to are drowning now because people want things that they haven't seen before. You know, I mean, back to WandaVision, because I'm currently obsessed with it, but I think part of the reason why it's standing out so much is because it's such a genre blend and it's so new.
Mhm.
Or something
And
like I May Destroy You,
Yes,
which
mm,
oh my
just
God,
has like
so
a
good.
fresh, it's like, it's just so fresh, and you're like, I haven't seen this. I have not seen this before,
Yeah.
you know?
yeah, speaking of, I may destroy you. I was talking to my manager one day about this show, and before it came out, I think, and he gave that little tagline. It's like, yeah, somebody's making a they're making a comedy about date rape. So it's like, I don't know how I feel about this. And I was like, oh yeah, that does not sound like a good idea.
I
And
would be like, oh, I'm all in. What is
but then when I watched it, I had forgotten about that conversation. I had forgotten that this was the show that I was watching. So I just turned it on because I had seen her on her other show Bubblegum, um and I was like, oh, I want to see what this girl's doing now. And then I got sucked in and was like, oh, this is the show. Oh my gosh, I did not know that this was what it is. And it's just, yeah, I mean, talk about a big swing and a flawless execution. I think is just amazing.
Yeah, it was so good.
Yeah, I mean, you need the gatekeepers, right? It's like we're in a business and it's a risk averse business. They want to minimize risk. And how do you take these creative chances? I mean, all art is risk. Do you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? All a creative endeavor is risk. And the bolder the idea, the riskier it feels to the creatives. So, I mean, I think it just really takes vision, from vision and good taste from the execs, the people who are making the decisions. And just that's the game we're in, right? It's got to feel like a risk.
Yeah, I think like to give executives credit, I think they're, if you look at all the cool series that are coming out, I think they're understanding that. And
I think so. I think you see that, whoa, like you see some old kind of holdovers where you go, oh, this feels so dated. This feels so, or the remakes happening still where you're like, really? Um, but yeah, we are in the age of peak TV, like you said, Maisie, and it's super exciting.
I mean, we have something. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen Bob Hart Abishola, but even that where you're just like, wait, it's an all black multicam from Chuck Lorre, where the love interest is a middle-aged old white guy, and I'm like, talk about a big swing. Like, I don't even know what that pitch was like, other than he's like Chuck Lorre, like, I got a show, I want to do it.
Great.
But you watch it, you're like, I think that's like kind of like the perfect, I think, mix of like doing something we've done before in a new way. What is that show at its base level? It's a guy's trying to get some girl to fall in love with him. How many times have we seen that model over and over again? But we haven't seen it like this. Like when we start getting into the cultural differences and obstacles about that, around that. But then also the people you see, like you haven't seen people like that before. And I think that's what adds that other layer that's great to watch. Like we can see all the cultural differences come out and come to play and have jokes, celebrating that and not exploiting that. And then also you see just people being people. Mm-hmm. They have nurses, they have, guys that work in a factory. We got doctors, and they just all happen to be connected or Nigerian in some form or fashion, and that's something we've never seen on American television, I think, ever.
Well, I like what you touched on there is you talked about how comedy can kind of help deliver these messages of things that we don't always talk about. So how do you all feel that comedy allows conversations to be had?
I mean, comedy is obviously one of the world's oldest coping mechanisms, and it's such an easy, thoughtful way to talk about sometimes really tricky, really painful subjects. And I mean, if you can take a complex idea and boil it down into a joke that people understand, you're winning at life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, right. It is the ultimate survival tool, our comedy. If you've ever gone through a tragedy, the need for comedy, you see where it comes from, where you're like, I need to laugh right now because this is so bad. Um, and that line between the pain and the humor, I mean, it's just such a thin little veil, and often they're just like, I mean, dark humor is the best. Getting On is one of my favorite comedies uh forever, and it's so dark. um it's just so dark, but what a way to talk about, you know death and the elderly and the healthcare system and all these things. Just, I mean, to laugh at just how terrible it is.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think sitcom overall, I mean, a lot of the great ones always used comedy to talk about issues. Going back to, like, if you compare like All in the Family with the Carmichael Show, it's basically the same show, you know, just told in a different way. Carmichael Show, every show was some big conversation on a topic, and Archie Bunker always kind of had a big issue that would set him through the roof that we had to reconcile and talk through. So I think that's just kind of way that good TV is set up. I think the difference is, I think, when if it feels like it's being pushed and it's contrived, or if it feels like if it's authentic and like a real thing, then it's something else. Because nobody wants to watch a comedy show and then think, I learned a lot. like.
I would, but I'm sad.
I would.
Sad.
I would.
You're supposed to end every comedy whatever with like, man, that was funny. And then afterwards, maybe like, oh yeah, that was
Well,
something in there.
Think about John Leguizamo's live show. What's the that he's doing? History for Morons or something. There is a very educational aspect to that, where you leave and you're like, I want to read all these books, like, and I need to educate myself about the history, of the people who are descendants and my descendants, the people who were attached to this land. And there's just so much that my intellect was like inspired, and I was aware that I'm a moron. And I have been made aware of that before, but he did it in such a funny way. So, I mean, yes, you can learn through comedy, but yeah, we should never, hopefully you want to be lost in story, and then also you leave from it going, God, and I actually learned a lot. I mean, that's the trick, right? It's like, entertain them, but with all writing, you never want to be didactic and you never want to hit people over the head. But having a bigger mission and giving something out, putting something out into the world, I mean, as a writer, that's what I try to cling to, not to educate, but maybe illuminate something and put something out there that hopefully people will take.
I think a lot about off of that with I May Destroy You, which obviously is dealing with such heavy issues of sexual assault, but is also very, very funny. And it's teaching you a lot of things as you go through. Like there were things in that show that I did not even know were legally considered sexual assault. Mm-hmm. And just the fact that, I mean, it's such a triumph that she could talk about things that are so heavy and so personal and kind of make you feel better at the same time, being like, okay, so now we are addressing this issue and hopefully things will get better. And my character ended up healing, and it's okay. It's horrible, but she healed. Yeah.
And I think in the space between those two things, there's a lot of discomfort, right? Like you're watching, you're like, oh,
yeah.
When is it going to get like, oh God, this is so uncomfortable. Oh, this is so, and then it's like, you get some relief. And it's really masterfully, like the comedy is the relief, right? From the pain, the relief. And when it's done so masterfully, it's like, here, she's taking us to this place where it's really dark and it's really uncomfortable, and then we're going to get a little bit of relief, and we're going to go on the ride with her. It's so great. I have to take that show in doses. We still haven't finished that show. And I have to go back to it because I'm always like, okay, I need to go back. Let me take one more.
My husband wouldn't watch it with me. He's like, this is too dark. How can you handle this? And I'm like, no, it's good.
This is life.
This is art. Sit down.
So let's step out and look at comedy for like the industry of comedy and how companies like places where you can go for stand-up or places where you can learn comedy can really work to create more inclusive spaces and bring the culture of a diverse and inclusive community up into their programs. So I know, Leonard, you've worked a lot with Groundlings to really help bring a lot of diversity to Groundlings and different ways of supporting that.
Yeah, I mean, the Groundlings, has been involved in, more intensely in their diversity and equity and inclusion efforts since about 2015, where the program was like formalized. So, people have been working on it for a long time, but that's when an actual program and mandate, came into place. And since I've been a Groundling, I've been, active and just doing whatever I can do. That's the great thing about being a Groundling is, I have a place to perform and I have a platform to do it, and I can kind of do whatever I want, with the time that I have there. So, I do a lot of, independent panels, try to produce different shows, where I'm encouraging more diversity in a different way than they've been able to do before. As to how you do it, I mean, I think again, it just kind of goes back to what I was saying originally. It's like you just kind of got to do it. You just kind of got to, like, and if it's foreign to you and it feels funny or whatever, it's like that's okay. Just get started and just start doing it. And hopefully you're doing it for the right reasons and not because somebody's hashtagging you or protesting your office. Hopefully you're doing it because you're like, I want to be doing this. And you just take whatever steps you can do, to bring it forward, And also, it also helps that I have, some friends, that are diverse, outside the Groundling. So it's like if I bring them to do a panel, it adds another level to its, prior, usually the Groundlings is pretty insular in that we, our guest stars or our guest speakers are like Groundling alumni or Groundling Sunday Company alumni. But once you've tapped that pool of people and you got nowhere else to go, like you got to go on the outside. And so, if I take credit for anything, it might be, being more aggressive about bringing people in from the outside who normally wouldn't perform at the Groundlings. Like one of my first panels was with my friend Randall Park. We just did a panel about, I don't know, it's kind of like about positive thinking more than anything else, but and then, the creators of Sherman Showcase, Diallo Riddle and Bashir, I brought them on to do a panel talking about Sherman Showcase and their TV shows. So I'm always just looking for ways to just try and bring other people in and just give people a platform to speak. And hopefully people will be watching that and by association will start to view the Groundlings as a place that is more inclusive, because that's the goal. But, you can't do anything with the goal if people don't show up, to actually participate, so we're trying to put the message out to students like we want this to be more diverse and want this to be more inclusive. So please come through the doors.
And Roxy, I know with your show, Minority Retorts, and with your podcast, you're really pushing the storytelling and helping bring those perspectives to a wider audience as well. So when you're looking at a set of stories, how do you kind of pick which ones you want to present and build a show out of that?
When I was pre-quarantine, when I was really producing more of those shows, I really would choose the storyteller, because what we were doing was, I wanted somebody very dynamic who could tell a story with no notes, and also have cues, like visual cues. Like we had some comedic elements that were like visuals. They could use pictures and stuff. So you really kind of had to have it memorized. In a way, you had cues, but I wanted it to feel very improvisational. So that requires a particular kind of performer. Because a lot of people will just want to read notes, or they're stand-up who like want to do bits, but not necessarily a story. So I saw myself as a recruiter. Like I would go out to storytelling shows, and I would go to find talent, and I also I found performers that way. And sometimes I was very taken with them, or a story that they told, and I'd put them on a spreadsheet, and then I would look at all past Groundlings, because I was doing it at the Groundlings. There was kind of, I knew I had to bring in outside people, because the alumni of the school, it's only so many people, people of color and people who would want to do storytelling. Storytelling is a very specific way of writing, and so I was limited. So I would look through alumni, talk to people, go out and recruit, and just see if I could put together and who could make the date. Quite frankly, when you're doing scheduling, like who could make the date and who's going to show up, and then just like leave it. You just have to trust when you're producing things like this. Somebody's probably going to bow out because of schedule and Hollywood or traffic, or God forbid it rains that night and you're really screwed. So just like trust that the perfect people would be there telling their stories, and that it would all come together, and we did one show, a virtual show over this quarantine, which Leonard hosted with me from our living room. And that was super fun. So just trying to bring these voices and these performers that I think are wonderful, that don't get seen on a stage like that because they haven't gone through the program, or they didn't, get to the high level of the program, which is its own thing. Doesn't say anything about the level of their talent.
And Maisie, for like working in a writer's room, what sort of things would you look for there to help make that a more inclusive space?
I mean, I guess with every show, the onus is mainly on, people staffing it to care and to try. I think the more inclusive a room is, the better the stories are, because the more honest they can be, the more perspectives you have, the better it'll be. I also think that mentorship is really important in writing, because a lot of times, like, people will get a job on a show and they won't really know what to do. And it helps if there's an older writer who's like, okay, so, in a room, you have to know who to listen to. Here are the different things that you can do. Somebody who's willing to read your writing and sort of be honest, but not too blunt, to help you get better. And then also give them a little bit of time to adjust, rather than just expect people to hit the ground running, because it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, well, not along those slim lines, but my personal gripe, actually, this has nothing to do with Maisie. My personal gripe is just when you talked about businesses, what they can do. My personal gripe with the industry is years ago there was this, push for diversity, right? And there's still all these reports still come out about, the diversity in the directing pool, diversity in the writing pool. And so what they've done is many times these networks will make these programs, right? We're looking for writers. Oh, we should do a writing program and we'll help nurture these other writers. Great. And so, or directors, we're looking for directors. We should nurture these directors. Great. So you get people coming out of film school who've directed shorts, directed movies, fighting to get into these. Thousands of people apply to get 6 slots, with the Sony directing program, or thousands of people writing to submit, to get 10 slots for the NBC writing program. Then you get into these programs and then they try to get them staffed and then they still don't get staffed. So then all you've done is created another barrier for someone and wasted another year of their life telling them you can't get in. Whereas I feel like the way they want to make real dramatic change, take those people submitting. Let's go with 10%. You got 100 different writers. Well, guess what? There's a shit ton of TV shows out there. You don't think you can find 100 people a job on 100 different TV shows? I think you can. Even if you did 50, even if you did half, you're doing 5 times as many than you ever have done. And all you needed to do was be like, who's writing? Because that's all an interview is, right? A showrunner reads your writing. I like this writing. Let's bring this person in. Let's interview. Great. You seem like you fit with the room. Great. Because you still have to prove yourself in the room. Mm-hmm. Same with directing. You still have to prove yourself on the set. That being said, not everybody is going to be the right fit when they get in the room, just like not every director is going to be great to direct TV just because they went to film school. But the point is, give them a shot. Give them a shot and let the work figure that out, and let the environment figure that out for you, as opposed to creating these great little barrier things. I know a director who did 4 directing programs, 4, before he finally got working. Wow. Now, granted, he's red hot right now working, but as somebody who's interested in directing, I called him up and he told me he did 4 after film school. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, well, I don't have time in my life to do that at this point in my life. Like, oh, so you're kind of almost saying it's never going to happen, I've also, submitted to multiple writing programs over the years, and I get feedback like, oh, it was great, just wasn't good enough to get to the next level thing. But I'll also have people who write on television shows to read the writing, like, this is great, we got to get you out. And I've had an experience where, just because I knew someone, they got my writing into the hands of a showrunner, and then all of a sudden I have an interview. So it's so confusing. So it's like on one level, you can say, well, your writing might not be good enough for this program, but at the same time, if I have a direct line to a showrunner, it's a good enough sample to get you an interview. So what are we talking about here? If I had 10, if in that year I was able to get 10 different showrunner meetings, if I knew 10 other showrunners, I'm confident I would have found a job, right? I wasn't right for that show, but using the showrunner's own words, like, this sample is what got my attention. The sample was like, I have to meet this person. I thought this was great. So, that's just my personal gripe. And I know I feel like somebody else might share that feeling, but it seems like it's easier just to try and start hiring people and using these programs or whatever, these funnel systems to find the talent. And then just let's figure out a way to get people employed. And there might even be a level where it's like, okay, these people are great, but they need a lot of work. So yeah, great. Send them to the damn program. Somebody didn't go to film school, doesn't have a lot of, experience in that, but has, shows a great promise and talent. But I mean, I just know too many people who are overqualified for these lower level jobs and can't get in.
Yeah. I've had some friends who have done the writing programs and they all have kind of similar complaints. And one of the biggest ones is that they teach you how to be a writer, but mainly they teach you how to pitch and develop, and they don't teach you how to be in a room. So if you're going into a room from a writer's program versus somebody who's been a writer's assistant on that show the year before, you're almost coming in at a disadvantage, because if somebody hasn't taught you, there are specific room cultures. It's like you're going in kind of kneecapped a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it varies from show to show, who Steve Levitan probably runs a room way different than, Prentice Penny on Insecure, Yeah. But, those writers, the writers in the Insecure is a perfect example, I want to say, about getting people jobs, right? Getting people a shot, like from the bottom all the way up to the top. I have seen assistants become writers and are now, after 5 seasons, leaving the show with not only their own shows, I've seen writers leaving as execs who are now getting their shot to direct. I've seen actors, some of the actors on the show, get a shot at directing. I've seen, PAs elevates, up to, they had a game plan where they were like, we're going to find people who aren't necessarily all over the place. And they had some other experienced execs, from other shows in the earlier seasons, but they seem to be on a mission to populate the earth with people qualified to do the work and giving them shots. I mean, it's the most diverse environment I've ever been in, from the writer's room to the behind the scenes in the camera and the PA department. I mean, most of the DPs and ADs I've seen have been women, and just people of all kinds of colors. It's really pretty fascinating. But I mean, I think that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about the model. Like, just get people employed and just let them, we'll figure it out. They'll flourish or they won't, and that's okay. But to not have that shot and to wonder is just the worst.
As you guys are both talking, I keep thinking of the word like investment and, growth mentality, right? So who are we investing in as writers of the future? And how can we have a growth mentality about, where they are and experience, whether it be in writers' rooms or experience with writing. I mean, you have such limited and small pipelines to solve a huge problem from, just decades and decades and decades. So you have this kind of, they talk about generational wealth getting passed down, and as people of color being left out so many years in Hollywood, we're at a disadvantage. We don't have the torch being passed through generations. We don't have the mentors or, the elders to look up to. They're small in number, or people that could really, pass the baton, mentor us, take us in, take a chance. And I think Insecure, what you're saying, Leonard, is they really seem to have a mission, conscious or not, to kind of like, okay, we got to make this we've got to cultivate, plant the seeds and disseminate, get it out there. That's how growth happens. That's how change happens. But, I'd like to see more of that rather than these programs, these diversity programs. Everybody's trying to get in through that one little door. And you're bleeding so much talent and so many stories. And what we've learned with Peak TV is that there is room. There's an endless amount of content needed for the world at this point. Everyone's addicted to their phones, to their screens. So let's get more doors. Let's make the doors wider, because everybody benefits from these stories. Everyone.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying nobody should have the skills and whatever. What I'm saying is there's plenty of qualified people who can't get their foot in the door because they don't have the history or because they don't know somebody. And so, these programs are great as an introduction, but it seems like once you've done that, great. I mean, it's all in the page, right? It's all in the writing.
I think people should have no skills, actually.
Twitter has been a great place to try and bring in new voices. There are a lot of, really big, respectable showrunners who are reading people's work and shouting it out. And I know there are a lot of organizations that are new, that are trying to give people a way in. The Bitch Pack does Start for 8, where they pair an individual up with 8 mentees and just try and give them tips like, here is how you break in. Here are all of the general questions that you may have not had somebody to ask before. And I do think it is ultimately on the showrunners to be the one who are responsible for what their rooms look like.
Have you seen, Maisie? I don't know if you feel this. I feel this I feel this happening in the comedy world, like with live comedy, that there is a little bit of reluctance when it means I have to give up my space and power. So it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna do it, but I don't have to give up anything. I'm not giving up my power. I don't really have to move over, but we checked a box, so we're good, right? Do you see that happening?
Yes, and that is something that I really struggle with, and it's the idea of like whose comfort is the most important. Because
Mm.
it's like a fundamental thing of comedy that you're at your funniest when you're most comfortable. But a lot of times, just specifically as a woman, I've heard people say like, I don't think I can be creative if you're too sensitive. And I'm like, you're just saying you want to offend me and say terrible things, which is then cutting the legs out from under me, because then I'm not going to be comfortable enough to be funny. And
Wow.
yeah, that is definitely something I've seen and dealt with, and it drives me nuts.
Yeah, that's like the next. It, that is the little thing that I'm seeing now. Like it's got to feel right. It's like I feel like it's got to hurt a little bit. You're gonna have to give something up. That's what it feels like when it's equitable. It's not that you get to be the king and that like you're gonna feel it a little bit. You're gonna take some hits because and we've been taking hits for so long. We've all been kind of shrinking and dealing, just like, oh, I got to put up with this in order to, have this job or get this opportunity, so yeah, like the scales of justice, it's gonna tilt a little bit and you're gonna feel that, ooh, to get it equal.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see.
What is that? What is that quote? What is that quote like to the
To the
to the
victor spoil.
no, to the oppressor? Like equity feels like oppression or something like that.
Oh
What's that?
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, for what is it? For someone who has always had privilege, equity can feel like oppression. Is that it?
Yeah,
Mm.
that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I remember like one of the most painful things for me in the wake of Me Too was hearing male comedy writers be like, well, nah, I can't hire any women. They're so sensitive. I can't say anything anymore. It's like, oh, that's not the point of this, guys.
Yeah, you totally missed the whole thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I've heard that too from my other comedian friends who are like, yeah, it's just hard being a white guy now, and I'm like, how?
Yeah, I mean, look at
How?
look at the guild memberships and tell me it's hard being a white guy.
It's never hard. It's never hard. Like there's so many. This brings me to Bitcoin. Look, there can be a new thing, and that old thing can still exist and be doing just fine. Just because Bitcoin is a thing right now doesn't mean money's going away or the stock market's going away or whatever. It's just like you can also be in on this new trend, this new thing, this new Bitcoin thing, and it can be great. For the people who got in early, it's been great. For everybody in trying to get in now after the hype, they're trying to figure it out. It's awkward. We don't know what's happening, but there's still a stock market. People are still using money, debit cards, cash, all that other, those things are still there. It's just, yeah, I don't ever think we should really ever see a lineup, comedy like in a stand-up room or on television or anything where it doesn't feel like the real world. And the real world is a lot more diverse than what's often been portrayed in television and film. I mean, it's almost propagandist in a sense where you think like, wait a minute, every story is about some handsome white guy saving the world.
Well, it is like probably. I mean, those things work on your subconscious, where it's just like the possibilities of how you see people subconsciously. Like that's how it works. Intentional or not. When you just see, Latinas as maids or gangster girls, you see me walking down the street, you think I'm going to take your trash out. No, but like a lot of people in the stores think I work at Walmart or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, you look like what should be working here, or you look, do you know what I'm saying? Like those things do matter. That's power. That is the power. because when we don't see other people in all their full range of possibilities as human beings, we oppress them. They are oppressed because we basically limited the potential of their being. Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. I remember seeing somebody was making a joke about their kid wanting to be Black Panther. It was something like, how do I tell my kid he can't be Black Panther for Halloween? It's, the kid was white. But I remember I have a bunch of pictures of me as a kid in a Superman shirt and having a little Superman doll. Like it didn't occur to me like, oh, Superman is white, so like that you can't do that. For me, again, I got into the fantasy. I recognize this is not a real thing. I love the powers. I love to be able to fly and shoot laser beams out my eyes. I want to be Superman. And it's the same thing. And I think it just kind of really came full circle for me, seeing this little white kid, the power of just, that representation. Not only does it empower, young Black kids, or anybody of color to be like, oh, there's something, I can dream, I can be part of this fantasy world, but it's also great when it reaches, like some little young white kid is like, I just love this character. I'd love to be able to be that guy, and have those powers. And it just becomes a universal thing. Like you can accept that because they made a whole world and a whole person.
I think you hit it on the head. That is the power of representation, right? It's like that we see people as humans, right? So my little cousin dressed up as Tiana. Princess Tiana is, the first Black Disney princess. And she's a little, very light-skinned Latina, and that's her favorite princess. And she dressed up as Tiana, had the, the costume and the wig, and that was her thing. And it's so powerful.
What are some actionable things that people watching can take, whether they want to be writing more inclusive comedy, whether they want to be performing at places with more inclusive comedy, whether they run a place that does comedy and they want to be more inclusive? We've heard some great things. We've heard take a risk. We've heard bring in outside help. We've heard just hire people. What things would you like people to take away from this that they might be able to act upon?
Well, it's funny. One of the things we've been talking about lately at the Groundlings is something as simple as like a suggested viewing list or reading list and places to go see shows where they normally wouldn't go. Right. So we're talking about how do we implement that, where it's just like, whether it be a scheduled day of the month where we all just go out as a crew and do that, or whether we just send out an email blast, like these are some shows going on in town, that you might not know about, of people of color performing and doing comedy, and the hopes is that people will start watching things and seeing things that they normally wouldn't, or they weren't aware of. And because of that, their reference point is going to grow and the familiarity with that type of comedy is going to grow. And, so yeah, I would say that for people at home, like, watch these shows. You can watch these shows and not be from that background and still love it. You can watch Fresh Off the Boat and just appreciate it as a hilarious family comedy. You can watch Insecure and appreciate it as just some, kind of coming of age, adulting issues. You can watch it from that. You don't have to be like, I can't watch just this only Black show. The same way, I can watch Mad Men because it gets all these awards and I want to study television and, what's good writing or something like that. And feel, or where I've come around to on Friends, whereas I can watch that and be like, yeah, that's a funny show. I can't deny the jokes, So, but I feel like, for the most part, anything that's majority white is typically viewed as like the standard and like it's acceptable, and anything that's not is like, well, we just did that for them. No, any minority that's got a show or any group, that they're trying to write a universal story just from their specific background and point of view. So, watch these movies and watch these shows and just, increase your range of reference.
Yeah, I would jump on that and say, kind of get curious, like hyper curious, and go out on like hunting expedition, not hunting, but like gather very friendly and positive hunting, and gather, find talent, get curious, like you're looking for, new music when you're like, I'm gonna go find out about country. That's something I don't listen to. Let me go explore that, and I would say go towards things that you have an immediate reaction of, that is not for me, and see what happens. Like Friends, like, oh, I don't watch this. This isn't for me. Just, go into those areas that repel you, as well as what, you're finding like, oh, that's interesting, just to expand this, expand. And then as creatives coming up, and I would just say, if you don't see people who look like you, God, we need you even more. Please keep going and fight. And I know it's hard. Just keep going, because we need you.
That was lovely. I guess on just a practical note, I think being a supervisor is such an easy way to help young people trying to break in. If you are a showrunner, or you're an EP, or you're someone who is in any way a proven commodity, and you hear about somebody who is promising, and you just say, hey, I'm willing to vouch for this person, that's an easy way for them to get a job. I know I sold my first pilot because a woman who I really respected reached out to a network and said, hey, I know a writer, she's really promising, you should meet her, and I like her, and I'm invested in her career, and I'll help her out. And I don't think they would have been willing to take that risk on me if she hadn't stuck her neck out for me. So that's such an easy way to help people who are trying to come up the ladder.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Before we leave, where can everyone find you, see your work, find out more about you?
You can hear my voice on the Casa Grandes on Nickelodeon, and you can check out the Risking Space podcast that I co-host with the wonderful Carla Mosley. And I'm on some Zoom shows, some improv shows, one next week at the Groundlings. So who knows? Maybe I'll pop up on your Zoom. And on Twitter at Roxana Ortega. Okay, who's next?
You can find me on Instagram. I am Leonard Robinson. I don't post a lot, but I am there. I'm usually more active in the story. It's a thing. Other than that, I performing regularly at the Groundlings online. So go to groundlings.com, see what shows are popping up. And if you have some time, you can catch up. I started recurring on Insecure in season 3, but watch the whole show and wait for season 5.
And you can find me on Twitter at Maisie Culver. I'm also not a strong poster, but sometimes I do. Sometimes I do post. And also keep your eyes out for Day of the Dead on Sci-Fi. That should be dropping this spring.
Oh, can't wait. And good, I've been meaning to ask this question this whole time, Maisie Culver. Any relation?
No, I wish. This would have been a lot easier.
if you were related to the city.
Yeah. Probably wouldn't have had to be an assistant for so long.
I'm Maisie Culver of the Culver City Culvers.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for attending the BRIC Summit 2021. Make sure to follow BRIC across social media at BRICFound. And once again, my name is Matt Buchholz. Thank you for joining us.